Frayeur, the king of terror.
This is frequently assumed to mean that there's going to be a king of terror coming from the sky. In 1999 it was assumed to be the Antichrist, or perhaps a comet, or perhaps any number of horrors you might care to mention.
Across the world as the day approached, people claimed Nostradamus' verse was bound to come true.
There was a panic, a real panic, because it seemed to be referring to the end of the world.
Stock markets dipped, and in some countries shops were stripped bare. In France, the noted designer Paco Rabanne was so convinced the end of the world was nigh, he cancelled his major Paris shows.
Nostradamus qui ne s'est jamais trompé, jamais.
However, the 24th of July came, and then went. And the world didn't end. Nostradamus experts then recalculated, and a new date was set for the 11th of August. But there was no apocalypse. So why not? What this episode reveals is one of the biggest problems about using Nostradamus to make predictions. The texts of his works are full of errors. The entire 1999 prediction hung, for example, on the word défrayé, or king of terror.
When this verse is examined with a knowledge of 15th, 16th century French, and when the first edition of Nostradamus's printed quatrains is also examined, there is no apostrophe between the D and the E in défrayeur. So the roi défrayeur with no apostrophe simply means a good, kind, generous king, a man like King Wenceslas in the Christmas Carol.
It turns out that over the years, Nostradamus' words have constantly been changed and added to. And the very technology which popularized his work added errors. Peter Le Mesurier has made a detailed study of the original quatrains.
It's very difficult to find even two copies of a single edition that are exactly the same, because the whole thing was printed by hand. Print fell out of its frames while it was being printed. Adjustments and corrections were made as you were going along. So as a result, quite a lot of words got misprinted. Very often the word de, meaning two, got printed as de, D apostrophe E-U-X, meaning of them, or the other way around. Or dame, meaning lady, got printed as D apostrophe A-M-E, meaning of soul. Then when it came, for example, to unfamiliar words, unfamiliar place names that the printer had never heard of, he just did his best with them, and sometimes they didn't even approximate to what the original was.
Undeterred, Nostradamus' fans maintain some quatrains can be relied upon. Lionel Fanthorpe firmly believes that one verse predicts a famous French war hero.
3 times, one who is named de Gaulle will be the leader of France. And if we think of General Charles de Gaulle, a very valiant leader during the Battle of France, and then again he led the Free French against the occupying German forces. And finally there was his famous presidency from 1958 onwards. So that 3 times a leader named de Gaulle will lead France.
But Peter Le Mesurier thinks this is an example of another problem with Nostradamus: mistranslation.
It's quite common among people who don't understand Nostradamus' French to say, well, there must be some deeper meaning. Even people who know French are sufficiently unfamiliar with 16th century French to have to do that, or people who know 16th century French are unfamiliar enough with Nostradamus' way of using 16th century French. It's a counsel of desperation when you don't understand what's there.
He thinks the text really refers back to the ancient Roman Empire.
Verse says, Hercule le roi de Rome et Danemark, de Gaulle trois Guillons surnommés. Actually, all he's saying is de Gaulle trois, of the three Gauls. Julius Caesar had described Gaul as being divided into three parts. So all a translation should say of that is, from Rome to Denmark, Hercules shall be surnamed the leader of tripartite Gaul. Now you can read de Gaulle into that if you like, but you're stretching it a bit.
So with all this ambiguity, what does this mean for some of the most famous Nostradamus predictions of all? Are they any more reliable? One of the most famous foretells the rise of Hitler, or so it's said. But how credible is this, since the name in the verse is not Hitler, but Hister?
He's reputed to have thought, or at least pronounced, that a man called Hitler will come popping out of Germany and cause a lot of trouble. In fact, he goes to great lengths to explain that the word he uses is Hister, which in fact is the old Latin name for the lower Danube, so although the words are similar, one cannot get one from another.
Whereupon, of course, the nutters will come back and say, but he was born quite close to the Danube. So you could actually never win with this sort of thing.
But if Nostradamus meant Hitler, then why didn't he just say so? His fans say he had to be deliberately imprecise, and for a very good reason: the Inquisition. And that as a converted Jew, Nostradamus therefore had to be very careful about what he said.
One of his dangers living in the 16th century was that he was under suspicion from the Inquisition. And they were very brutal when they arrested and then executed their victims. And so Nostradamus was trying to cover his tracks.
Nostradamus was only really a minor irritant, if any, to the Inquisition, because they thought he might cross that thin dividing line between what was considered perfectly normal astrology and incredibly dangerous magic. So it was a very thin line. But really, I don't think he was high on their shopping list. I mean, there were plenty of other decent Protestants to get hold of and burn, so why bother with this rather wayward character from Provence who was just claiming to be a bit of a soothsayer?
There probably was no need to turn words like Hitler into a secret code like Hister. There is, though, a more obvious flaw with the famous Nazi prediction.